Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Wednesday, November 6, 2024. Today is the day after the United States general election, so I am capable of announcing some pretty big news. In that, ShiftUp has signed a copyright deal with a South Korean company called Com2US to bring back my beloved lewd RPG gacha game Destiny Child in a reincarnated format. It won't be the same game, but it will almost certainly use the live 2D art of Destiny Child and probably similar story. The big difference is, according to this announcement that was on Destiny Child Global's Discord and is on exactly one Korean website, which this is peak Asian web design here, in that there is just a massive amount of information. The way I've heard it described is Asian website design is all about giving comfort by giving every single bit of information, whereas Western web design has gotten more and more simplified by giving comfort to be bite-sized chunks. But yeah, the big difference between this new Destiny Child game that Com2US is going to make, actually have one of their subsidiaries make, is that it will be an idle RPG, where Destiny Child itself was actually a standard gacha RPG in that you controlled the characters. Now, to what extent there's a real difference there, it probably isn't much, because there was an auto mode in Destiny Child, certainly, so it is only a slight change to have idols, have it be an idle game. It does imply, generally in idle games, that there are always technically battles being calculated in the background, so if you came back 12 hours later, you would probably have some level of progress and some level of currency added to you in an idle RPG. Whereas Destiny Child, I don't believe, had anything like that. It just had a stamina system. Now, first thing certainly they could do with this, though, is not call it Destiny Child, because that is Google search poison as a name. You search Destiny Child, you get to ban Destiny Child over and over and over again. Even in this translated from I believe this is Korean, but it might actually be Taiwanese. They have translated it wrong, and it says Destiny Child instead of Destiny. But yeah, even that would be a better name, frankly. The other thing they certainly could do is try to lock down who the main protagonist is going to be. Honestly, you could get rid of the main protagonist and his assistant succubi characters in Davy, Mona, and Lisa, and then that still would leave you with a ton of gacha anime waifu characters. There's some boyfriendos also in the game. It's not all just anime girls, but it mostly is. So yeah, this is super exciting. Tika Taka Studio, they've just signed the contract. It's interesting how it's described as a subcultural mobile game developed by ShiftUp, the makers also of Stellar Blade. They have over 500 characters already made. This is the second time that I'm aware of that Destiny Child has also licensed out its imagery and its characters that were fairly beloved. There was also a kind of tower defense line game, not the cell phone service line, but a tower defense game where characters moved in a line that's still around. So yeah, ShiftUp not willing to really work on it themselves, but willing to license it is a very different experience, certainly, compared to any other game that has shut down. Certainly Destiny Child had a pretty big fandom as far as a mobile game, but it wasn't in the top 30 or so of earners. There was certainly a lot of money that was capable of being spent on Destiny Child. There just wasn't enough whales spending money on it. I also think we should do a shout out to Outback Steakhouse by somehow having an ad in South Korea. I guess Outback Steakhouse might be fairly common in South Korea. But yeah, that is certainly very exciting to me that we may see the characters that return in some form and fashion. And they could do a whole new story, because the original Destiny Child didn't really finish its story and was kind of meandering, and they changed really what the way the protagonist happened. Inherently, if they didn't hire back the artist, the first artist at Destiny Child, they're not going to be able to make any more characters over 500, so there might just be a limiting factor to this game, in that they know they're going to go about 3 years or so at most and release 500 characters, and then probably never plan to make even a single new character, which might hurt returning fans somewhat. But yeah, if they didn't bring back the first artist or the second artist, they would be doomed. If they brought back the first artist, I think most people would be fairly happy with that. There was nothing really wrong with the second artist, but it just wasn't quite the same feel. These characters, in particular, you want to call them childs, but I don't think they really were called childs in the game, are from the second artist, who had more of a, I guess, artsy feel to his art style than the characters. And certainly seeing these pictures in still just does not do them service as live 2D images that would bounce back and forth and wave. And weirdly, Destiny Child was the only live 2D game I've ever seen that really just has the characters sway back and forth like that. Every other live 2D game I've seen has done a lot more with their animation. But yeah, my hope here is this. Yeah, this was from Korean, not Taiwanese. I don't know where I got Taiwanese from. It would make way more sense for a Korean news reporter to be talking about Korean companies. But yeah, my hope here is that it would come back and be successful, and that they would support it quite a bit. But we have to be cautious, to say the least. And I think it is also worth pointing out that there is a decent chance that this is just a made-up story, since there's only one Korean economics journal, is what it is, that is talking about it. I turned up my frames per second, looked at the video for the last stream, and yes, it was particularly low. So now I think I've turned it up too high. I also spent a massive amount of time yesterday adjusting my quality of service, just to see if I could get the QoS on my router to be more effective. One of the things is that there's a temptation to use buffer bloat websites and be obsessed about buffer bloat, when in reality, if you have a relatively new, in the past 5-year router, buffer bloat's probably never been a thing. If it ever was a thing, it's probably not a thing now. There is a amount of latency you're just going to have if you have a 2.5 gigahertz connection on a cell phone when you're running that test too. So really you need to be running buffer bloat tests only on wired connections, at the very least on 5 gigahertz connections. because you'll see significant latency on the 2.5 gigahertz no matter what. And that will lead you down the wrong path of thinking buffer bloat is an issue, when in reality, if you're looking at a tester to see if there's an issue on your internet, that's not really an issue. The real issue is if you're playing YouTube videos and it's just loading over and over again, and you're playing at single speed and you're not watching a live stream. Now, if you're playing at more than 1 time speed and you're watching a live stream, you're probably running into the current frame that has just been streamed, and that's causing the constant delays, which happens to me quite a lot because my default playback speed is 2 times. So anytime I watch a live stream, I either have to jump back quite a bit, half the length of the entirety of the stream, whatever that would be, to avoid loading. But yeah, I spent way too much time tweaking buffer bloat, and I really can't say too much about it as far as a suggestion, although I do find on my Asus Merlin QoS settings, you're probably better to have the maximum 256 packets of WAN, wide area network, your internet basically, overhead into it, just giving the maximum amount of free lane, like an extra highway lane, just for connecting to the internet back and forth, because the vast majority of what everybody's doing is going to the internet back and forth. Almost no traffic is going to be going from one computer to another computer inside your wireless local area network. And see, that seems like that helps quite a bit, but what that eventually creates is a situation where a buffer bloat speed test will look really fast for a few seconds, and then it will start to slow down once those 256 packets have been filled up and used. So you'll see a drop after the first few seconds of downloading anything, which is really what you want anyways, because the vast majority of the time you're going to be downloading web pages and little pictures that download in less than a few seconds. So you really do want to reduce the amount of delay to start a download and any delay in the first second or so of something downloading. At least that's what I want on my network, and that's what I would suggest for most people, is that regardless of whether you think you're streaming video or playing Call of Duty online, the truth is you should really optimize your network for web pages, web page downloads, web page loads. And certainly with my macro opening hundreds of web pages a day, each day, that's a thing. Alright, speaking of a thing, let's just see if we can change settings midstream here. I bet I cannot. I swear it's going to actually let me. Okay. Like, by all means, that probably should crash something. But we'll set that at a lower frame rate. And we'll see if we are still dropping frames. Yeah, I just don't really get the whole deal here as to why I started dropping frames all over the sudden, and I just don't feel like I changed anything. And I guess increasingly there's just this point where I need to recognize that I am needing to document and back up settings way more when I make a change, and just make that part of my automated process, instead of being flippant about it, which is what I really do. I'm also, on top of trying to schedule more videos and screwing that up somewhat. And so a lot of YouTube shorts, I think, are all aired at the same time, either yesterday or the day before. I'm playing the sure to get me demonetized titled game, The Suicide of Rachel Foster, which it is a crazy game in a few different ways. It's another one of these walking simulators that is not really coming off very satisfactory to me. It is a game that has minimal interaction. Well, you can pick up and look at things. It's in the Unreal Engine. Definitely feels like it's ripping off both The Shining and Gone Home. The main protagonist seems to be very crazy, like just in many different ways, because the whole story just doesn't really make a lot of sense. That you have this girl that has to come to this hotel she doesn't want to come to inspect it for some reason before she can sell it, because she inherited it when there's really no reason for it. She gets snowed in for at least 8 days so far. She's been snowed into this hotel all alone, and by the 7th day she's unpacking Christmas trees and setting up Christmas because it was over Christmas, but they didn't really even say that or set that up. But yeah, it's just insane that you would do any of that. Like, first of all, you don't have to inspect a house or hotel before you sell it. You have an inspector inspect a hotel. You don't have to drive up in a snowstorm and get yourself trapped. And it does seem very unreasonable, even in Montana where it's set, that you would be stuck in a hotel snowed in for 8 days. Particularly after about 48 hours, I would be sending out the alarms to say, send a helicopter or something to me, find some way, send some to get me out of here. Just for the mental problems there, just being isolated that much would lead even your average person to insanity. Yeah. The worst part, I would say, though, of this is that you are really being given a lot of opportunities through branching dialogue, because you're talking to this voice on the radio that may be real, maybe not, and that's just one of the things, is you just could interpret the story in so many different ways, but it doesn't feel like the story is actually written in any way that there will be a definitive ending at all. Web fishing has made it to the 88th spot. Yeah, that might be a game that people just play a ton of, and it gains popularity just through a long haul. Yeah, and I don't really have too much more to say here. Unfortunately, though, I am seeing still some frame drops. Let's see if we can lower to something else. Tuning, high quality. Tuning, low latency. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm also going to have to go to the bathroom, which I wasn't planning on that, so I'm gonna have to immediately pause the recording, and people watching live can enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! Live during that time. So yeah, we'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, we were really just at the pre-show warm-up spot, and yeah. So yeah, there was one game I know, what was it? Let's see if we can find it. That in its first week, I think Dragon Age Veilguard here has made it very high on the top 100 of concurrent players. at 89,000 players at one time in a 24-hour period, which, yeah, it does not really beat some of these all-time highs for things like Counter-Strike Go, or get you into the top 10 list, which it needs roughly about double that. But yeah, that also, I think, highly highlights how gaming and gamers as a community, if they really are a community, which I don't really feel like they are not a monolith, and there is just a large selection of people who are in the 20,000s every day playing different games. And certainly as the list goes down, there's even larger selections of people in the groups of thousands or hundreds playing other games. And yeah, I don't expect Dragon Age Velguard will have made it to my chart yet, just because it's been out for only a week. Yeah, there's just no way. Yeah, we calculated it last stream, and it was something along the lines of several weeks, like 5 weeks, that a game would have to be in the upper part of the top 100 to make it onto this chart, which doesn't make it a very effective chart to show off 3 times a week, really. So I probably have something to think about in that. Let's see. And it still looks like I am slowly dropping frames, but maybe I figured out the direction I should be going, so let me see if I can tweak it a little bit more. I'm tuning from low latency. It was high quality originally, and that was dropping about 50% of the frames. Low latency is dropping about 20% of the frames. So if I turn it to ultra low latency and change nothing else, because we want to do a scientific experiment here and only change one thing at a time, let's see what that does. Yeah. There may literally just be a latency issue. But yeah, even at ultra low latency starting off, there still feels like there's a drop frame issue that's happening here due to network traffic. Yeah, I think inherently internet service providers just screw you over. Yeah. Yeah, let me see if just got to turn down that frames per second some more. On a variable bit rate. Maybe I should just be at the preset of the slowest best quality. I have no idea what multi-pass mode also does. But yeah, messing with all of this while live streaming is crazy, but it's something I need to really fix. Inherently, the thing is, when I go back and look at these live streams, everything's just a little bit blurry, and there's blotchiness in things like the background of the blue, and it's just very noticeable and very ugly. And so that's something I'm trying to have not happen. Maybe I figured it out here. We'll see. At least I didn't immediately start dropping frames. But yeah, the quality needs to be fairly high in these live streams to show the text. Otherwise the fonts just don't render right. and it looks really, really bad, and it's just not readable. And I'm testing it on my cell phone in full screen, which is the right place to test it, because yeah, if it looked really good on computers, then that doesn't tell me enough information. It needs to look good on a Chromecast, on a TV, and a cell phone also. Yeah, they're promoting Apex Legends right now, but they are also promoting the Save and Sound event presented by Bedtime Digital Games, a company I never heard of. They're selling Death Stranding and Last of Us Part 1. I did also just see a slick deals for Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown at $17 and some change, which at that price, that is a steal for the Switch version of the game. It's not as good as, say, buying Hades for $9.99, or buying a better game like Resident Evil 4 Remake for $20, but it is still very good. The 10th anniversary is happening for Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which I believe this is the 10-year anniversary of the remake of Binding of Isaac, which is called Binding of Isaac Rebirth. And they've basically been constantly adding content to it. Team Nicholas, I believe, has for 10 years. That is why it's still at the high end of the concurrent player charts, is that it's just kind of this infinitely replayable game with content. And they are also promising some full online co-op updates to come pretty soon, and I assume that is going to be an update for this version of the game, and not just a whole new game that they would sell a third time. Although 10 years into it, selling it a third time wouldn't be that objectionable. But that being said, I don't know if you could really remaster the graphics any better for its plain and simplistic art style. Yep. And I imagine we won't have too much else that's changed. New and trending games mean something very different. This one is adult game in particular is still trending for some reason, so, and almost certainly trending because it's not hidden behind the adult section. Or at least almost certainly that's why I'm seeing it. The other game's not particularly as eye-attracting. I'm still looking for a better way to label my YouTube shorts instead of just calling them new and trending games. But I have not thought of any new better way. Here you can see Dragon Age Veilguard is at 73%, mostly positive. And yeah, I am attempting to get my scheduling macros to work correctly. And so, starting now and going until at least December, there'll be the 3-minute YouTube shorts will be treated like pre-recorded long-form videos, and then pre-recorded long-form videos will hopefully be scheduled after the fact. Now, I was going to play Borderlands the pre-sequel after playing, what was I playing? Torchlight 2. But yeah, I decided to shake it up, and I had the Suicide of Rachel Foster already installed, so I figured I'd play that. It being published by Daedalic, a German company known for having unhappy endings, I assume this is also going to have unhappy endings. It does look like I've gotten most of this set correctly. I'm seeing a little bit of frame drops at 1.5%, that is an insignificant number, really. Like 371 frames of 20,280 right now have been dropped. The AMD new CPU has come out and more tests and people are talking about it. And yeah, it's an exciting but overpriced first of a new generation chip. I think it definitely spells good things for AMD and the AM5 chipset, which is what they're doing there. So the 9800 XD, which the XD I think means it has 64 megabytes of L3 cache, which works great with gaming if gamers can use that. It's a good chip if you absolutely have to have the best of the best right now. Arguably though, it also pushes down the potential prices of some pretty good chips from the previous generation, and if you can wait a little bit longer, which many things maybe say you can't, there very possibly will be not a 9800 version, but like a 9700 version or 9600 version that has perhaps a few less cores, which you still don't really need more than 4 cores, I think, for gaming. We'd have to go back and check how many cores are in the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 Pro. Whatever amount of cores are there is pretty much what games are being programmed to. Any more cores are going to only help you if you're not doing something other than gaming, like content creation, which, yeah, that's a different story. Or if you're doing gaming and content creation, so you need maybe 2 or 4 extra cores just so you can record or stream while you're playing the game. But then there still is an argument to have just a completely separate streaming box and computer capturing video and audio instead of having it all on one computer. There is also, right now still, not the best argument or the clearest path as far as what video card you could get from AMD to have an all AMD build, which is what I really would like to see. I personally would like to do next time I build a computer. So there still are performance issues that have things like a 480 or a 470 or 490 still be a lot better in PC gaming for a lot of games. So yeah, it's not a clear path. The 9800 AMD CPU in the future, with future motherboards, might support PCI Express version 5, which could be great, but we just don't know yet. And that would also mean you'd have to buy a new video card to really max out the bandwidth of a PCI Express version 5. And so, yeah, the 9800 is the first step to a new generation of building a computer in which you would need a new graphics card to take advantage of a PCI Express version 5 and a new motherboard to support it, and very possibly new RAM, although there seems to be a kind of low sweet spot with the 9800 AMD CPU anyways, in that overclocking the RAM or having it over a certain speed doesn't seem to really improve things too much more. But yeah, it is the first time in a rather long time that I've seen people actually excited about the new CPU. This Safe and Sound music festival is an odd way to promote video games, particularly a lot of which aren't out. But, it's not the craziest thought ever. My biggest concern, certainly, I do want to see audio be more focused on in video games, and surround sound in particular be embraced more in video games. But my biggest concern here would be that this is somebody from the music industry secretly running this thing, and the influence of the awful music industry might move into the already awful video game industry. And then we would have this mega merger between two fairly bad industries working together to become even worse. That would be my concern to a certain extent. It's not a really big concern because it probably wouldn't happen. There are just a lot of these kinds of events and small cells that happen. And it is kind of funny how Steam's front page has basically become like a blog where if you're willing to pay, any event you want to promote, as long as it's somewhat related to video games, will get promoted for a day or two. Particularly, well, it has to be more than somewhat related to video games. It has to have clearly a deep tie-in to video games. Yeah, I don't think I would say the Game Awards may be the one thing that is most loosely connected to video games that's been promoted on Steam. But even in that case, when you have these landing pages for the Game Awards, they do link back to places where you can at least follow new games. And there's still a big push for demos. Surprisingly, there's a push here for soundtracks. And then there's a special page here just talking about bedtime digital games. The people running this are presenting it. Now, I have a thought that I might need to implement as far as why some games were not getting curated, in that I think I may need to just add a pause in between some of the other sequences, because the way my new macro works is that it's parallelized, and so it opens a page for Steam, then it tries to do something else while in the background letting that Steam's game page load all the way, and then it tries to look at the page to curate it to see if it's an adult game that needs to be closed, because YouTube doesn't want me talking about adult games. See, now I mean, it really is just dropping down to like 500 kilobits per second. Yeah, I just don't... It really is just getting squashed. Yeah. Maybe it's the keyframe interval. It's a problem. But yeah. My macro is, sorry, I'm still fiddling here. It maybe needs a pause to make sure all the pages load, and that would explain certainly why some of the game pages aren't getting curated, is that the page just didn't load fast enough for it to look at it. But yeah, I haven't implemented that. And then we do have some weirdness today in which some of these articles are just out of order once again. And I don't know why tabs like to jump around that much, but it does seem like it happens fairly randomly. So yeah, let's see. So I had programmed Video Games Chronicle to close any tabs talking about the podcast. I had not programmed it to close any tabs talking about their Patreon. Video Games Chronicle is particularly getting more and more annoying in that they are just self-promoting themselves and treating that like an article. Let's see. The Breath of the Wild and Animal Crossing co-composer reveals that he left Nintendo a while ago. Yasuaki Iwata shared the belated announcement with fans. Interesting. To actually quit a Japanese job is strange. But also, in the case of video game composers, I would assume that they probably were closer to independent contractors. I'm not sure if you really can get away with the whole independent contractor scam as well in Japan, but there is actual instances of people who are actually independent contractors. But I wouldn't even assume that this guy would fall in that category. To be an independent contractor for real, you have to be 100% in control of your own destiny. Nobody's telling you where to be or when. You're just having people contract with you to deliver something on specific terms at a certain price on a certain date, things like that. But anytime even in a contract they start to dictate, well, you have to work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, or you have to wear a suit and tie while working, that's the point where you're not truly independent and you're not really contracting out just for the delivery of a product or a service. You're contracting out more to be an employee. Of course, in the United States, many people are meeting the legal definitions of being an employee, but being told that they're independent contractors and being exploited because of such. Yeah. Well, I could see, certainly in the case of a music composer, taking out a contract to make music for one game and that be it, and then he would be able to take on other jobs. So apparently in July of last year I took a step in a new direction by leaving my position at Nintendo. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone who supported me over the years, to those who enjoyed my work, and to everyone who listened to my music through the projects I was a part of. I've been working on new projects since my departure, and I hope to have the opportunity to share some of those with you in the near future. It seems like there's some kind of non-disclosure agreement he signed for a year. He worked on Breath of the Wild, mostly involving composing music for the towns and dungeons in Breath of the Wild. I didn't really see any dungeons in Breath of the Wild. They're tiny little rooms. I guess that's what the dungeons are. Yeah. So this isn't particularly the main person who I'm not sure Nintendo has ever credited, and Nintendo probably never even really credited this guy enough. But yeah, he doesn't really seem like he is the main person in charge of the whole experience here of video games. Like he's not the one who's been making Zelda's music in background for that long of time. And really, it kind of just screams that he probably wasn't much of a good fit, because yeah, particularly for a Japanese person to be hired completely by Nintendo, which seems to be the case, and to not stay around for decades upon decades, that is very strange. Although that is moving towards the way things seem to work more often nowadays in Japan. But particularly at Nintendo, you follow the Shigeru Miyamoto style of employment, where you just get hired there out of college and you stay there until you're 75, ready to die or retire. Or, yeah, 75 or 65, whatever the retirement age actually is in Japan. Probably doesn't even really matter, because it's more of a case where you probably don't retire even when you hit a retirement age, if there is a retirement age. There is an argument for mandatory retirement ages all around the world, but I think that wouldn't really ever happen in Japan. I'm just realizing now too that I happen to know somebody that is a Westerner that got sent to Japan by his company to work there, and I bet this person loves it, because I bet this person, I don't know him that well, is a workaholic. Almost certainly. And so I bet they love working in Japan with a whole bunch of other workaholics. And when I think of it that way, I think I can make a very short list of several people I know that are workaholics that would love to work in Japan. Just indulge in that overall negative mentality that is so attractive to workaholics. Moving on. The Switch 2 is going to be backwards compatible with the Switch. Nintendo has confirmed. Information about the console will be revealed at a later date. Now, why, I ask, is this picture so out of line? What happened here that the picture is not getting centered and stretched? Well, it might be a case that this picture is just so simplistic. This is the first time, though, I've ever seen anything like that happen. I don't see how this is particularly that big of news, really. Sure, I'm sure every mainstream video game journal site wants to post an article, and any kind of article they can, around the next Nintendo console, which I'm still not sure they've confirmed is going to be called the Switch 2. But it's been the standard practice for the past couple generations of bigger consoles from Nintendo to be at least one generation, well, to be exactly one generation backward compatible. The Wii U was backward compatible with the Wii. The Switch, obviously, the Switch 2 would be backward compatible with the Switch. It seemed pretty obvious, particularly how games work these days. If you expand the thought to Nintendo portable consoles, it's every generation effectively is backward compatible, at least up until the Nintendo DS. Maybe the new 2DS XL was not fully backward compatible, but the original DS would have allowed you to play an original Game Boy game being plugged into the bottom of it, even though the DS had a completely different cartridge. I'm pretty sure that's the case, unless I'm just dreaming this up. But yeah, if you were to really break down the original Game Boy, which was black and white, to the Game Boy Color, which is the next major improvement, I think there may have been a backlit black and white Game Boy that came out. But yeah, Game Boy, then Game Boy Color, then Game Boy Advanced. I'm pretty sure the cartridges for Game Game Boys played in the Game Boy Advance, and then the Game Boy Advance slots played in the DS. So, yeah. There's 4 or 5 big generations of portable gaming, that were backward compatible. And that's ignoring the hundreds of different variants of Game Boys that were sold. But yeah, certainly in modern times, it is mandatory for a console to be at least one generation backward compatible. And if it weren't for the fact that the PlayStation 3 was so weird, it would be the standard that at least 2 or 3 generations are backward compatible to some level. The Xbox Series X is backward compatible to 360, almost all the 360 games, but also I think some of the even original Xbox games. This also probably indicates that there will not be any change in the form factor of the cartridges for the Switch, which is fine. That means a lot of accessibilities will still probably work. It probably also indicates that there will only be moderate changes in the form factor of the hardware itself. I imagine internally the Nintendo Switch cartridges might have a lot more storage for the new versions for the Switch 2 games. But yeah, I also, on a broader scale, before I move on, heavily suspect that Nintendo is going to struggle for new system seller games in the first year or two of the launch of its new console. And that may be why they're launching it past the Christmas season, is because they may just not have a new game that is particularly tied into it and selling it. They may be behind releasing the next Mario game or the next Mario Kart game or something like that. There would be a system seller. Halo Infinite has added Halo 2 inspired playlist and third-person mode, and PC players will soon be able to play the Halo 2 demo shown at E3 2003. Interesting stuff, I suppose. It is, I guess, part of the continuing effort here of Microsoft to bring back Halo and make it relevant again. Yeah. We certainly have evolved quite a bit from an era where it's just a bunch of space marines in body armor running around shooting each other, though. And if you were going to make a new Halo reboot, remaster, you almost certainly would have John Spartan have a face, have hyper-realistic graphics, have the game look more realistic and visually attractive, and then you would lean a lot less into the running and gunning as the only sales point. Hogwarts Legacy sequel will tie in with the new Harry Potter HBO series. Warner says Hogwarts Legacy recently topped 30 million in sales. Do they have a name for the HBO Legacy series? One of the many fake AI generated garbage things I see on Facebook when I do look at Facebook are fake posters for fake movies that supposedly are announced. And I did see one for a Harry Potter movie that I just don't believe is really what's going to happen. I think the HBO series is a reboot, remake. So new kids doing the same thing from the same books. And I imagine there isn't really a lot of reason to tweak or change anything, because any tweak or change from the beloved books would be a problem for the fandom you're targeting. Yeah. But yeah, I imagine maybe they would try to set up something to continue, or events to happen in between the major events of the book to make a TV series last longer. But they are also working with kids, so they can't really move too slow. It is going to be very much a case where whatever kids they hire at the beginning will be right about the age to graduate from Hogwarts by the time they get to that point in the story. Yeah, the only way you could slow things down is if you had a sequel series to the HBO series where they're adults who are in college and just taking a lot longer time. Let's see. Moving on, BioWare has shared some details on Dragon Age the Veilguard's first patch. It's coming to all platforms this week. There's a confusion in my mind, certainly as far as how many Dragon Age games there are and what the relevancy really is as far as should I think about playing a Dragon Age game. Although clearly it's catching a lot of people's attention. Apex Legends launch a Royale mode, taking the game back to the beginning. The time-limited mode features original maps, legends, weapons, and more. Which I guess is a way that Apex Legends can try to bring back some of its old audience. BioWare suggests that Mass Effect fans should temper expectations for the In 7 Days event that November 7th would be tomorrow. Studio says this year will be quieter because of Dragon Age's launch. Inherently, I think Mass Effect has suffered more than it has benefited by having a In 7 Day and making it this annualized thing of concern, where almost all the years since Mass Effect first launched has had very little new to say on November 7th, and that would be the case for any game. There is going to be probably 4 years before your first game and your sequel, and then another 4 years between your sequel and the third game in your series. There is some speculation I've heard that they are still thinking about making a new Mass Effect game and trying to re-establish the series. At some point, I feel like maybe it's just time to give up the ghost and admit that 3 games getting rushed out does not make an iconic series anymore, where in the past it very possibly may have made a series rock solid and iconic. But then you also have to look at things like Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider had like 6 games rushed out, and at least 3 of them were not particularly great. Or Hitman, same thing there. It might have more to do with consistently releasing something, even if it's not particularly good, to stay relevant. And it might be the case that only worked in the past, and nowadays it's practically impossible to make a new established long-running series. And then even some of the long-running series have a lot of caveats around it, such as, let's see, Fallout 1 and 2 being a different company completely from Bethesda, who then bought the rights to Fallout and made Fallout 3 and 4. Yeah, I don't know if Splatoon might be the most recent series that's fairly iconic enough that I suspect Nintendo will keep on bringing it back even a decade from now. Whereas things like Horizon or The Last of Us might very well just disappear and not come back. Yeah. Again, I think this is a problem with the tentpole mentality of spending millions, if not billions of dollars to develop tentpole games, just to fund the development of the next sequel, to hopefully get enough money to fund the development of the next sequel. Too much money, too much effort is being put into games that the publishing companies are expecting to be heavy sellers always, when it's just not the case. The Sonic series in particular might be a great example of that too, where Sega has put a lot of money into the development of a lot of Sonic games, only to be disappointed at least half the time with the Sonic series. And Sonic came in early enough when video games first started to be iconic over that longer period of time, but he's almost iconic more for despite being a video game character than actually for being a video game character. Moving on, November's PlayStation Plus Essential games are now available. It includes Hot Wheels Unleashed 2, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Death Note: The Killer Within, which, boy, they announced this game and released it very fast as far as the Death Note game. But by the looks of it, I'm not particularly surprised by that, because it does also seem like it is a very weird, simplistic game that has just somehow gotten the license to Death Note. Which, yeah, it's not like they're doing anything else with Death Note right now, so why not sell the license? Do you think I've got the frame rate right? Now it is just a matter of the quality. Is the quality good enough? And I'll have to just check after the stream on that aspect. You know, I don't believe YouTube takes that long to process live stream footage, so if it lets you select 1080p at 60 frames per second as a option, that's probably as good as the live stream is ever going to look. It won't let, I don't think it lets you select, although YouTube could change at any point how it works. The Pokemon card game I'm still playing, for what little there is actually to play, but they are now doing a Lapras EX drop event with 5 new cards by playing solo battles. Players can unlock 5 promo cards. Felt like there was more than 5 promo cards you could unlock. And then the promo cards, as far as I can tell, have just this little icon next to them, which makes them a promo card, and maybe different art. I also think I figured out what the EX cards mean, in that you're playing for, well, I can't actually show you the rule here, but it would be here. You're playing for 3 win points to win a game in Pokemon the Trading Card, and you usually get 1 win point every time you defeat an opponent's Pokemon. If you defeat an EX card, you get 2 win points. And generally speaking, EX cards have more health, or a more interesting ability to attack with. All the Pokemon cards have only 1 attack, which is weird. It feels like there should be 4 actions on each card, just like the Pokemon game. But nope, they have. It's a very, very basic game, and yeah, I guess it works as far as baby's first trading card game. I would have thought that there was a possibility you would have gotten 3 win points if you defeated a 3rd level Pokemon evolution. So if you had, well, let's see, if you had Squirtle then evolve into Blastoise, then evolve into Wartortle, I think that those are the Pokemon that all evolve into each other. I would think then defeating Wartortle as a 3rd level Pokemon would give you 3 win points, and defeating Blastoise as a 2nd level Pokemon evolution, you would get 2 points. And then it would be more focused on the evolution aspect. But no, doesn't look like that's how Pokemon, a card game, plays. The thing to point out here is that there are these wait timers in a currency that to be able to play the fights and challenges in solo mode. So if you run out of currency, if you lose a lot, you may not unlock everything. The 12-hour wait between gaining one more ability to battle or using event hourglasses, which is more of a premium currency, is crazy. And it does seem like that's how the Pokemon card game is going to try and make itself be more palatable as a game, is that it's just going to have a lot of promos happening and a lot of events happening, and just try to encourage you to play more of the card game. I definitely, before this event, was starting to feel like I'm just going to finish all the solo player modes and then have absolutely nothing to do, and then it's just going to be this weird app that I go into every 12 hours to open card packs just because I'm keeping or building an account for, I don't know, a niece or nephew who might want to play with it at some point, which is a big waste of my time, certainly. But yeah, it's hard to even begin to think of how they could make the game better, since the game itself is so simple. The trick, really, since it's digital, would be to introduce an expert mode, introduce card text that isn't in the original cards that let you do something different. But yeah, it also is worth pointing out that anybody who comes late to the party because of this limited time promo is probably going to be a little upset. They really didn't promote the trading card game when it launched a couple days ago well enough, and so if anybody even started playing now, they may be missed out on something, or they may be so close to missing out on something that they'll never have that gotta catch 'em all complete collection that every Pokemon fan in the past at least was encouraged to have that desire to have. Moving on, Netflix is removing all of its interactive specials this month. Almost all of them. It is keeping the Black Mirror Bandersnatch one, and then 3 others. So here we can see a picture of a bunch of them, most of which you wouldn't have recognized. Specifically, I would say I did this one, was not particularly impressed by it. I did the Escape the Undertaker one. That's one of the ones being taken down. I did the Cat Burglar one, not inspired by that one either. And then the rest of these I didn't even know about or didn't have any interest in. It is also worth pointing out that the next day after this announcement, Netflix announced that they are going to go all in on AI generated content for their interactive content. So yeah, I imagine it was difficult to keep the apps to work with these interactive things. I'd imagine you have to run a server somewhere more to maintain these things. And so I imagine it just was not particularly efficient thing. Like, on the face of it, you would think that these interactive things would install just like a game on your phone or on your Roku TV, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually super basic, and whenever you clicked a button on there, it just sent a signal to a server to start streaming a different video, and that almost all of it was being run on back-end servers instead of it being run on your own hardware, which they can't control the speed of a Roku TV, which tend to be pretty underpowered, or a cell phone speed of processing power. The ones they're keeping are Black Mirror's Bandersnatch, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy vs. the Reverend, You vs. the Wild, and I think that might be Bear Grylls. It says You vs. Wild, and Reindeer vs. Wild with Bear Grylls. Nope, I guess maybe not. So I would have to assume that those are the most popular ones. But noticeably, that also means things like Barbie Epic Road Trip is not popular. Their own Carmen Sandiego to Steal or Not Steal is not popular. This is once again a great loss for game preservation, since I doubt too many people even figured out how to rip this content from Netflix's servers, let alone to make a backup for historical preservation. Yeah, like Captain Underpants, this is a typo, I'm sure, again would be one I would have thought would have been fairly popular. Jurassic World, you'd think was popular. I imagine that was animated, though. I think I actually did Trivia Quest also. Last Kids on Earth. A lot of these obviously targeting kids, and Netflix, I guess, is realizing that they're not good at actually keeping kids as a fandom. Or that the interactive stuff is not really keeping kids' attention. It is also noticeable that these interactive specials have been around for several years, and no other streaming service has really tried to embrace that. In fact, no other streaming service has even tried to embrace games at all as a platform provider, with perhaps the exception of Amazon.com also having a game app store on Android and having Amazon Prime TV, although Amazon Prime Video is not particularly great as far as an experience goes these days. The striking New York Times tech workers have asked players to stop playing Wordle in solidarity. The hashtag Break My Streak has appeared on social media in support. I don't think that really hurts the New York Times financially that much at all, but it is one of the kind of things that a striking union might think up as a way of just making sure people know that a strike is going on, which in all fairness, I had not heard that a strike was going on between the New York Times tech workers, and just encouraging people to have solidarity. I'm not sure how many people even know what solidarity means these days, but yeah, to show their support. There is probably a high number of people that do have the New York Times subscription plan specifically just to play the crossword and Wordle and things like that. So if you stopped playing Wordle for a while, you might very well just cancel the whole subscription. Moving on, NVIDIA tells users to urgently update their GPU drivers, fix 8 highly severe vulnerabilities. The company warns that users are at risk of having their security compromised. It seems like there's several problems, but one of which was a remote code exploit where somebody could potentially take over control of your computer. So yeah, it's always a decent idea to update your graphics card at least graphics card driver at least once a month. But it also says it also is certainly a hassle and potentially introduces new problems. The vulnerabilities seemingly have been in the drivers for a while too. Yeah. So either this is the event of NVIDIA finding out that they've been screwing up for a while, or the occurrence that NVIDIA has had somebody sneaking in vulnerabilities into the code and they didn't recognize for a while, or NVIDIA itself has been sneaking in vulnerabilities for a while. I don't know. But yeah, clearly something has been done wrong, and this is bad news for NVIDIA, certainly. Although not really that big of a news, because it's not really going to convince too many people to not buy an NVIDIA graphics card if they were planning on buying an NVIDIA graphics card. It is crazy though that there would be remote code vulnerabilities in graphics drivers, and that almost certainly highlights a problem with the way Windows drivers in particular are made, and the way Windows in particular is run. This is almost exclusively, I assume, for Windows drivers too. I imagine Linux won't have that same problem, although maybe install the newest drivers if you have NVIDIA drivers installed on your Linux operating systems, just to be sure. But yeah, there was a talk of a new operating system, maybe even a new Microsoft-made Windows-like operating system that would sandbox a lot more even video card driver stuff, so less of these vulnerabilities could actually escape those sandboxes and do any damage. Even if there would be a remote code execution vulnerability, it would still be in a sandboxed operating system that wouldn't be capable of accessing other bits of data. Linux, I don't know how many people ever actually used it, has this like in NSA level security version of it where you can make very tight controls on what can and can't be accessed, but it's such a complicated thing to set up, and it just makes it incredibly difficult to install new software or do anything, that it is never really enabled for an average computer user. So Linux, even a nerdy Linux user, tends not to use the highly advanced access control. I forget the name of it anyways. I tried to set it up and use it once, and it was just like, oh, this is way too much extra work on top of Linux itself being a lot of extra work to get running. Let's see. Nintendo's president, with the same picture here, says that there is no change to the Switch 2 announced plans. The company intends to announce its next console before April. Furukawa reiterates. I'd assume that this is at a shareholders meeting. Yeah, nope, online press conference. Which, yeah, the new Nintendo president does seem like he's doing things a little bit differently. Let's see. Nintendo has also lowered its Switch forecast after sales declined 31%. Company made no mention of its next console in its latest earnings result. So there was an earnings result, and then there was a press conference. They seem to happen very close to each other, although the earnings results itself may have just been a form submitted. Um, but yeah. Does still very much feel like they are just churning out the last of the Switch games that can be on the Switch, and then they are trying to set themselves up for a stronger launch of whatever their next console is called, the Switch 2 or whatever, with other games. Because it definitely seems like you really wouldn't have sold any Switch 2s with like Mario and Luigi's Brothership, which isn't being received particularly well. Moving on, Xbox is rolling out a new AI support chatbot to testers. The support virtual agent can help players solve console and game issues. Microsoft, like most tech companies, I imagine, are experimenting with AI and calling a lot of things AI when they really aren't. Chatbots have been around for a long time, and the fact that they're programmed to respond with procedural responses and canned responses has been around for a long time. If there is a large language module interacting with canned responses, it may not really change the experience by much. It may just be a more natural way to speak to the chatbot. But it's been a long time for even procedurally generated chatbots to be programmed so poorly that people struggle to get them to understand what's being asked. The official PlayStation 5 Pro specifications have been revealed. Sony's mid-gen PS5 upgrade launches this week. DFRetro had a whole video about the PS5 Pro, and the frame rates alone definitely do make it seem like there are good amounts of improvements, but very much probably not enough improvement to justify the price if you already have a PlayStation. Now, if you've never owned a PlayStation 5 Pro might very well be the one to buy to get smoother 60 frames per second at potentially 2K or 4K on the screen. The actual hardware specifications also talk a little bit more as far as what a computer should be built at, or what the next Steam Deck should even be built at. Like an x86 AMD 64 Ryzen with Zen 2 is actually pretty old technology now, because there is now Zen 3. But yeah, you could probably build a Zen 2 with 8 cores and 16 threads. Pretty good. Notice here, it's not even bothering to tell you what the frequency is there. It's running at like 4.8 gigahertz overall, or whether it's running at 5.2. It might even be as low as like 3.8 gigahertz. And then it's saying a AMD Radeon RDNA based graphics engine, but not really telling you an actual name because it's custom silicon. But yeah, that is basically the graphics card I would recommend building with too, something like that, an RDNA based graphics engine. But the actual chips and GPUs may have very different names than just Radeon RDNA. That would be the keywords to look for. And teraflops, 16.7 teraflops, are things that you would have to struggle to see if a off-the-shelf AMD graphics card even mentioned how many teraflops. 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM for the graphics. 16 gigabytes graphics card at a high speed, but not saying the actual speed in megahertz. And then, oddly, only 2 gigabytes of DDRS static RAM, which is really small amount, and definitely highlights how consoles are leaning very heavily on the graphics RAM, which is much faster to do most of the processing and loading 2 terabytes for custom SSDs is, yeah, probably the minimum amount you want as far as storage space. Although I could see you getting a 1 terabyte SSD and saving money then by buying a 12 to 16 terabyte spinning hard drive to back things up on. Although in reality, you're not going to want to play any games off of a spinning hard drive, so 2 terabytes probably is the right amount. And you may not need to back up anything, so a spinning hard drive is very possibly not necessary. Don't really care about USB ports, but apparently one of them is only high-speed USB, while the other is super speed USB at 10 gigabits per second. And then more micro SD, M2 SSD expansions. You can connect a disk drive. And then I don't even know what 802.11/BE is. I've never even heard of that as a Wi-Fi standard. Yeah. I'd have to look that up, because last standard I heard for 2.4 gigahertz was 802.11.AX, and AX also covered 5 gigahertz. So maybe BE covers that 6 gigahertz level. It says the hardware supports Bluetooth 5.1, which I'm not sure that is even out yet as a standard, but or maybe that's a whole generation behind. There's a lot of asterisks here, certainly, but yeah. The PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution and improved frame rates at 60 Hz or 120 Hz on day one. So yeah, DF Retro specifically did mention that almost everything has a level of frame rate improvement with the PlayStation 5 Pro. Maybe not worth the price, but still something. So Wi-Fi 6 is really the standard. Maybe Wi-Fi 6E technically is the standard now, but yeah. Wi-Fi 7 is 802.11BE. Interesting. So it's claiming that it supports that, but the adoption, according to Wikipedia, of Wi-Fi 7 hasn't even happened yet. And yeah, it more than likely does make a lot of sense to skip 6E. We probably will see routers that, and maybe a few devices that say Wi-Fi 6E going on sale, but a full number improvement would be the right move, certainly. And yeah, the Wi-Fi 7 standard promises just a much better experience. Of course, Wi-Fi 7 also is going to be at a higher frequency, so the distance is going to be even shorter than Wi-Fi 6, 5 gigahertz, and way shorter than 2.4 gigahertz. Although in fairness, the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi standard was just too powerful and too low of a frequency to start with. The hardware to get at higher frequency is more expensive and takes longer amounts of time to actually be developed. So had Wi-Fi first come out and been at 5 gigahertz, it wouldn't have probably worked at all. It probably would have been way too expensive. But yeah, if those weren't factors, you would have almost certainly started at 5 gigahertz, or found a frequency somewhere between 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz where it makes more sense. It's somewhere in the 3 gigahertz range, which noticeably they are skipping away from. But yeah, the distance and the power ratio. Although you could have also started at 2.4 gigahertz and limited the power to about half of what it is, and then we wouldn't be in the problem we are in right now, which is every single internet service provider gives a free Wi-Fi router to every person who is house, and then they all flood the network. And there really ought to be a law saying that these free Wi-Fi access points, some of which have been designed to give free Wi-Fi to any AT&T provider using your internet, which also it just is a waste of the bandwidth. So yeah, if they were forced to turn those off, there would be half as much interference in your average neighborhood, as far as I can tell. But then there are just a lot of other people who have routers sitting around that are way too powerful, and there was just nothing in the system of Wi-Fi. Maybe Wi-Fi 7 is going to introduce something where it tells other Wi-Fi routers to lower its power and they try to coexist a little bit better. But yeah, it's up until Wi-Fi 7, every Wi-Fi router just really tries to broadcast at the maximum amount of power it can. Yeah. Of course, if there wasn't money involved in it, everybody would just have cell phone connections that were super fast, and it would be one standard frequency and one standard interface. It would be much more like the Star Trek comm badges, where you just press the button and talk to people. You're not inherently interfering with other people's signals. Moving on, new Star Wars Outlaws creative director shares details on the game's biggest update yet. The 4th title update promises improvements to combat, stealth, and character controls, which all sound like very basic core gameplay mechanics that really shouldn't need updates by the time you're at the 4th title update. But I don't know, I can't really hate on the idea of people trying to fix a game and making it better, particularly since most games I play are years old by the time I get around to them, and that has certainly benefited me in many cases where the experience is just way better 10 years later than it was on day one for some games. Although most of the games I cover I think are relevant because the experience was pretty good even on day one. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown DLC has been offered as compensation for launch issues. Early buyers will get a special edition of the 1986 Porsche 911 Carrera Coupe. 3 new Black Ops multiplayer maps have been teased ahead of Season 1's launch. Season 1 takes Black Ops to the criminal underground. And yeah, certainly, I guess there's a question of what is Black Ops at this point, looking at this screenshot. Yeah, this just does not even feel like a Call of Duty Black Ops game. It feels much more like a Fortnite game. Let's see, PS5 Pro images compare its size to the original, the Slim, and the Pro. Which, here's an image from Famitsu. And I guess this is the original, this is the Slim, and this is a Pro, which does, I guess, show that the Pro is a little bit less deep or less wide than the original and about the same size as the Slim. Seems to have more cooling vents and fins on the edge, and definitely seems to be a little bit more artistic. Like from this angle, this is much more interesting to look at than this by far, and even this. And it also seems like there's just a brighter shade of white compared to the other skins, which maybe would pick up dirt and dust more often. You're still doing the odd Japanese thing where white is the color of death, and you've got a lot of white in your consoles, but that seems not to really affect people in Japan purchasing it. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the PS5 Pro redesign had to do with cooling. Connectors look like they've been moved around a little bit as far as height goes, but I'm not seeing anything particularly new as far as new connectors. And then clearly the desire is for the PS5 Pro to look like this and not have a disk drive, whereas there is still probably a desire for a lot of people to have a disk drive plugged into it. Notice that there are actually two different types of disk drives here, so I'm not sure which one of these actually would attach. I'd assume it's the slim disk drive, and this one is more of a built-in disk drive that's not detachable. If you are getting a disk drive, you still have an always online requirement in the PlayStation 5 series, so it's not still a console that you could easily take to a submarine and be off the internet for months and months and months and play video games on. I don't think the Xbox really allows for that either, which might be a huge argument for things like the Steam Deck, but even that may not work. Yeah, if say the Navy or any part of the US military bought a ton of Steam Decks to give the soldiers, or if it just became super popular among soldiers buying it for themselves, that could help forge a whole new generation of PC gamers. And then PlayStation had confirmed a list of 55 games enhanced by the PS5 Pro, and yeah, I don't think TF Retro has actually gone through all 55 of those games to check it out. And then new Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud have been dated. This is older news we already talked about. And then that'll bring us to the Gematsu articles. A new Virtua Fighter game is in development. Now, noticeably, even though I'm not a huge learned fan of Virtua Fighter or fighting games in general, I will say, while I do know the name Virtua Fighter, I could not name a single one of these characters. And in fact, maybe I recognize that character, or maybe this character just looks a lot like Samus Aran to me, and maybe I recognize this character, but yeah, I cannot name a single person. So if Akira Yuki is supposed to be the big name in Virtua Fighter, it does speak volumes on how unpopular I suspect Virtua Fighter as far as fighting games goes. Virtua Fighter was, I believe, originally an arcade game with 3D polygon wireframe characters, and so it was a gimmick in an arcade machine that could be a lot more powerful to have 3D fighting very early. But I just don't think it maintained popularity or evolved well enough to continue to go forward to consoles, and notably, it just doesn't seem like it has a Chun-Li style character that would be really popular and that you would learn the name of, unlike so many other fighting games. Like almost every other fighting game has several characters like Sub-Zero, Sonya Blade, things like that that you could name off the top of your head and see in your mind's eye what they look like. The Devil Within Satgat launches November 21st for PS5 and PC, and in 2025 for Switch. This is a 2.5D action platformer. Which, yeah, I haven't heard of this one before. And I don't believe... Well, there's a Steam link. And when I clicked on it, it did open a link to something that we've already made put on the following list. So, and this is now blue because I clicked on it. So once again, I need to actually remember to figure out why my macro isn't clicking on the links. I thought I'd fix that, but I don't think I really did anything at all, come to think of it. River City Girls 2 Double Dragon DLC launches November 12th, which is probably more of a cash grab type tie-in to promote Double Dragon characters. It is a little weird to have Double Dragon beat 'em up characters showing up in the River City universe. But yeah. Imagine River City Girls 2, though, having been out for a couple years, has very little to lose and doesn't see this new Double Dragon as particularly a thing to be worried about, because I bet they don't suspect this new Double Dragon is going to sell particularly well. That's the way I would lean to. Famitsu review scores for issue 1873 are out. Mario and Luigi Brothership, Slitterhead, Sonic X, Shadow Generations, and more. Before I even scroll down, I'm expecting some pretty low numbers for all of these games. They already said that Slitterhead, the makers of Slitterhead, said don't expect it to be perfect on day one. It definitely seems like there's some inconsistent low ratings for Mario and Luigi Brothership. Sonic X Shadow Generations might be rated higher than I'm expecting. Let's see. First of all, we start with a game I don't recognize called Angel Dusk, getting very high score of 35 out of 40. Debut Project Cooking Cafe getting a low score of 27 out of 40. And then Mario and Luigi Brothership getting a decently high score of 34 out of 40. Professional Baseball Spirits getting 34 out of 40. Slitterhead getting 34 out of 40. So I was wrong. We've gotten good reviews for everything. Mario getting 34 out of 40. Yeah. So that's a pretty good week, according to Famitsu, as far as game releases go. And maybe in Japan in particular, we're starting to see the beginning of good games actually getting released. And we really aren't too far off from the point where good games should start being released in the West and around the world overall. There is inherently this problem where some mainstream video game journalists just also like to get headlines by reviewing games lower than they probably should. Switch games will be playable on the Switch successor. Is this a image that Gamatsu made, or was this part of the presentation? Seems to me like probably it was part of the presentation. Would the DS have had games that were playable on the Wii? I don't think so. It's also worth pointing out, though, that the Wii was backward compatible with the GameCube. So I didn't even mention that earlier. So it really was 2 generations for the Wii and 2 generations for the Wii U, and then the Switch broke backward compatibility. And I don't think anything before the GameCube was backward compatible other than Game Boys and portable consoles. Let's see, Ginso Manage launches January 31st in the West. It's an otome visual novel being dated. I had this weird thought, and this has nothing to do with video games, but if you're young out there, I don't know how many young people would be listening to my streams, but yeah, if you're young and you're going to your first sleepaway camp, it would be very beneficial to keep your eyes open to have a romantic encounter of some sort, early puppy love type romantics, or if that fails, lie about it, because being perceived as somebody who could be attractive to somebody else inherently just makes you attractive. This is the wedding ring theory, that if you go to a bar wearing a wedding ring, that makes you more attractive as a male than because you're being perceived as somebody else already found you marriable and worthy of a relationship. And frankly, even puppy love, young first romances, people tend not to want to have to deal with the inexperienced. So yeah, there's certainly points in my life when I was younger where it probably would have helped me if I had made up a girlfriend from Canada, which is also what I'm suggesting, but not made the lie that crazy. Inherently, what you would do is you'd be open to actually having the occurrence, and just hanging out with somebody who you could call a friend, that we were having a brief romance. Most sleepaway camps are probably only going to be a few days. So you would see what lie would fit, that potentially you snuck off in the middle of the night at midnight and you watched the stars for an hour or two, and then maybe you went to first base, which is French kissing, just for FYI, the first of the 4 F's of the bases. I won't go through all of it, but yeah, you don't make a huge lie. You don't say we snuck off every night at midnight and had picnics and saw the stars, and on that on one night we went on to full-on sexual intercourse. That would be too big of a lie, and frankly, inherently, even if you really did have the experience, somebody is going to be jealous and call you a liar when you're young. This is advice really for 14, 15-year-olds, 10, 11-year-olds, to make yourself attractive by bigging up yourself and by telling a lie, which, yeah, it's not the best thing. It's much better if you actually did have an experience. Don't be anxious about it. Don't force it. Unfortunately, the newest generation of kids do seem like they're so asexual that they won't even do that. They won't even attempt to have relationships. So it's weird, and certainly it's miles away from the fictional stories that visual novel romance novels tell. Now, inherently, romance novels, it's, I guess, to get back to video games, have been very popular in Japan amongst girls and boys, and if anything, they probably hurt the actual ability of Japanese people to have romantic relationships. Societal reasons hurt it a lot more, but when you are living in fantasies, and when you're even perceiving how humans look in this anime style that's not anywhere close to the way humans look, and not really opening yourself up to the reality that the appearance of humans is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a bright, colorful anime character, and frankly, their appearance doesn't even really matter because it changes as people age quite a bit. But yeah, living in that fantasy and being satisfied or entertained by that fantasy is a great way to avoid actually experiencing it yourself and going out and risking it yourself. This is also the danger of porn. I hate the made up diagnosis of porn addiction, where I think that it really doesn't exist as far as porn addiction. People have obsessive compulsive behavior, certainly, and that might express itself as looking at porn, but you're still OCD at that point. And if you were, say, nanny-gated out of the internet and couldn't get to porn, you would then just express an obsessive compulsive behavior with some other form or fashion. But yeah, there is a danger in being satisfied with porn, in being satisfied with any form of fiction, and then letting that satisfaction be an excuse to not really try in your real life to accomplish something greater. This is also the smoking weed danger too, and that weed will probably not ruin your body or ruin your life, but it will make you satisfied with having very little and accomplishing very little on a day-to-day basis, when you should be out there trying new things, learning new things, just in general trying to improve your life. I feel like I'm preaching here at this point, so I will move on. But yeah, that was a weird thought to cross my mind, and these live streams are one of the few places where I have a bully pulpit to shout out the nonsense that crosses my mind, and not have it come off as too awkward and weird. It lets me ramble quite a bit. Moving on, though, back to video game news. Fairy Tail 2 details its game original story, unlocked after clearing the main story. Now, they're calling it a game original story, which I would have to assume that means the main story is telling the events of the Fairy Tail anime. Which I have not watched that anime, so I don't really know what would have really occurred then. But yeah, looking at these screenshots, seems like they spend a decent amount of time stuck on a tropical island. That's about all I could guess. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak 2 has a story overview trailer. We're getting more announcements of games that will probably take a while to show up. Let's see, RS34 has announced the Clean Rooms project, Karos Ports, and Karos 2, the Diffuse Sanguis. I have no idea what these games are. I've never heard of them. Clean Rooms project implied to me that these might be remakes of something that they don't own the rights to, or which would be weird. Certainly, I think that they maybe own the rights to the games themselves, but they don't own the rights to the engine that the game was made on. And here we have a YouTube video that doesn't want to play. And yeah, I don't know if that's my network or if that's just a different issue overall. Yeah, it just doesn't want to play. Maybe it's my ad blocker that's causing it trouble. But yeah, definitely don't recognize these games. Chaos first launched in arcades in 2006 in Japan. Ports were released in Dreamcast and Wii. A separate entry, Chaos the Beast of Re-Eden, was released on 3DS. The game is notable for its very distinctive elements such as black and white graphics, drum and bass music, and gross system, and a friendly difficulty for shoot 'em up beginners. They're shoot 'em up games. Now, unfortunately, I again have to take yet another break, so I'm gonna pause and more Yu-Gi-Oh! Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Inherently, I think part of the reason why I've been taking more bathroom breaks is that I keep drinking far too many sodas. Like, I've been drinking lemonades and frescas, trying to get rid of frescas and like fruity, sugary drinks instead of drinking water. But who knows? It also just maybe I'm getting older. Moving on with video game news though, I'm sure more people are interested in that. Made Cafe on Electric Street for PC launches November 18th. The voice casting collaborations have been announced. This looks like a maybe 16-bit RPG Maker type game, or maybe not. Again, this is one that we've already run into. Honestly, this may not have been made with RPG Maker, but looking at it. I'm not sure what kind of game it actually is, though. It says it's an RPG exploration game. There was a pretty low effort, I imagine, anime a few seasons back that was maids who were also like assassins. And yeah, when you get to that point where you're just rolling the dice on cliches as far as anime girls in maid outfits and assassins or yakuza or whatever that anime was about, it gets a little too silly even for anime. Let's see. Phantom Brave, The Lost Hero After Story is going to feature 6 characters from other NIS Nippon Ichi software games. This has been updated. So characters from Disgaea, La Pucelia Tactics, and Rhapsody Musical Adventure. But yeah. They seem to all be in this like chibi style. As much as the Disgaea series catches my attention, which these are Disgaea characters, the way it actually plays doesn't. Now Phantom Brave is a different game, so maybe it plays a little bit differently. Let's see if we can get a video to actually play today. One of the reasons why this may not be playing is that Firefox recently has been breaking quite a bit. Yeah. It's just been having, well, not breaking, but having to update quite a bit. And so maybe it just needs a new update. Because yeah, this is not working at all. Alright, moving on. Guess it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. I could have just come over to this page. This game is just not out yet. And yeah, it looks like more of a traditional RPG instead of a positional placement RPG. Although, it seems like it might still be somewhat of a positional placement RPG. Yep. One of the things about why the quality needs to be so high on these streams is because with my modified programming of how these pages display, the images move so fast that if it is not immediately in a frame or two, a very sharp image, it will just be a blurry mess as it jumps between them. Because yeah, I have this sped up very fast for my brain and my ADHD eyes. Not sure I really do have ADD or ADHD, but it's like that. My fast eyes, let's just call them that, where all the screenshots go through very fast, and so I can see everything and be certain I've seen everything very quickly when looking at game listings on Steam. But yeah, the point of these live streams is also to share the journey, and so if other people, because of low frame rate or low kilobits per second, are not able to see the images, that's not helpful. And I assume my streams before were high enough quality that you would have been able to see that, although who knows, I never really got enough views to get enough feedback. So if it was a case that people were watching my streams and it was just a blurry, ugly mess and that's why people were leaving, boy would that be a relief, because that's something I can figure out and correct. If it's people are just uninterested in what I'm saying, that's a lot harder to correct, and not something I might even maybe want to correct. But yeah, but I assume the quality was good before a couple days ago or a week or two ago, when all of a sudden something changed. Moving on, Switch worldwide sales have topped 146.04 million. They probably are pushing their numbers now as hard as possible to get to 147 million. And then the Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom sold 2.58 million. They're really going to 2 decimal points on the sales numbers. See, the thing I would do with the Joy-Cons, and I'll just throw this out as I was thinking about it, is that if you were going to try and make the Switch more of a pocketable experience, what you could do is throw out all the internal hardware, the touchscreen, and just have it connect to a cell phone, and then take these joysticks, these Joy-Cons, and put an indent in them so that the thumbstick here would snap into an indent here, and so you'd have to move everything around and make everything a little bit bigger, which is probably better for adult hands anyways. But yeah, not going to be that good for kids' hands. And then you would have for this stick you'd have an indent here, and so then the two Joy-Cons would just snap into each other, protecting the thumbstick so it wouldn't break in your pockets. You'd probably want to make the Joy-Cons thinner but wider, and you'd still need to put a battery in them, because then they'd be hooking up to your phone as something. But that does feel like if you got the size just perfect, you could snap 2 of these together, put them in your pocket, carry them in your pocket day to day, have your cell phone in maybe not the same pocket but a different pocket, or a cell phone case, more likely. That's what you should have it in, on a belt loop or in a purse or around your neck. And then you could just whip out the controllers, and then there would just be a Switch app on Android and iOS that would require Joy-Con connectors to play, and then that would bring us to a new generation of cell phone mobile gaming, having games that are actually good quality. And you really wouldn't be subsidizing the price of those games much or any by selling the controllers alone. But yeah, that's kind of what I would think of doing. There are perhaps some experiments you could do with newer designs of thumbsticks, that if instead of having a thumbstick there was just a big enough hole in something like a Joy-Con and you stuck your finger in the hole, your thumb in the hole, and bumped around the edges like a ring, and that was your analog stick, that might work. You could have a ring of magnets, certainly, and then it could be one of those magnetic analog sticks. The actual aspect of your thumb being on top of a stick is really just a metaphor of your entire hand gripping the top of an arcade stick in an arcade machine, which that's 5 generations ago technology. It doesn't always have to be that metaphor. We just need something that would move characters in an analog form. And arguably, that would be the Steam Deck touchpads. That would make a lot of sense also. Yeah, and I guess if you took the layout of the Steam Deck touchpads and got rid of the analog sticks, you could have a very small pocketable controller. But I do think that is where the fight is going to be, is we're going to see console controller makers specifically fighting to make a controller that is small enough to have in your pockets day to day, cheap enough to have in your pockets day to day, and that is just the absolute necessity to play games on cell phones. Of course, that has nothing to do with this article. This article here is just a list of sales numbers. But yeah, obviously the sales numbers are going to go up and up and up. But it's kind of hard to compare Nintendo to Nintendo without seeing the sales numbers of PlayStation or Xbox in comparison. But almost certainly Nintendo is going to be the winner with the highest number of software sales and hardware sales. The Halo 2 E3 demo is coming to the Halo Master Chief Collection for PC as a Steam Workshop mod on November 9th. They said it was coming to Halo Infinity in the other article, which is probably the same thing, but the names seem different. I Am the Future launches November 13th. It's currently in early access. This is one that got promoted a bit, and you can see it is rated very positively, and we're just waiting for it, I guess, to come out of early access. It very possibly will get its ratings downvoted if it comes out of early access, and there's just not really much more to it unless there already is enough satisfactory content in it for people not really to complain. This game definitely feels like it was inspired by Raft, and it is kind of interesting how now that Raft has finished itself and come out of early access, there's nothing new to say about Raft. Let's see, Tokyo Clan Pool launches for the Switch in Asia and PC worldwide on December 19th. Good Old Games replaces Steam as the PC release platform. Interesting. I wonder if there's a story behind why it's coming to Good Old Games instead of Steam. I mean, yes, we have an anime girl here, and yes, she's showing some belly, but that tends not to be the only reason the game wouldn't show up on Steam. Compile Heart games have been on Steam before. PC version was previously planned to be available via Steam. East Asia Soft has confirmed to Gamatsu that that's no longer the case. There seems to be no more statement on that. Let's see, key features are explored dynamic RPG set in the near future Tokyo. You act as the young Prime Minister of Japan and her Moe cabinet members. The Moe characters might have been the problem there. So it's this weird half politics in a Moe anime style game dungeon crawler. which you have to really applaud the Japanese when they go wild with their design. They sure do go wild. This isn't going to load either, but I actually do want to see this one, so I'm going to just click watch on YouTube and see if that works. Yeah. Rated M for mature, partial nudity, sexual themes. Alright, that probably is why it's not coming to Steam. Then is that they didn't want to be censored, and something in it clearly needs to be censored. I'd say at least one of those girls does look somewhat young in her more kawaii style, which is this style. The moe style, which you're going to see less of, is when they look more like Funko Pops, like that. It just popped up. Yeah, this character looks maybe a little bit younger, but really not to a level that there really should be any censorship. That character. So yeah, maybe Steam is just getting worse on the censorship. It does seem very random, and it does seem like the more you're a big company trying to get something on Steam, the more scrutiny you get. Whereas if you are just a Steam Direct publisher, you can sneak things on way easier. The biggest problem I would have with this game is that it definitely feels to me like this is your same old dungeon crawler garbage looking game that has really no relevance and really shouldn't be around still to this day. It's just, I feel like the game should be higher quality than that, and I don't even think it's really that easy to make those kinds of games. It's just that there are companies like Compile Heart that have just too long of a history of making those kinds of games and are very possibly just leaning on a historical desire to make the same thing over and over again instead of evolving. And a game like this is just always going to be a niche. There's always going to be a audience out there that doesn't want to look at anime girls, or doesn't want to do dungeon crawlers. So a niche on a niche, really. So you're just not going to get to the levels of success of Persona, which is, yeah, these games are going to be miles away from what a Persona game would have, or a competitor to Persona would have to be, which would be closer to something like Metaphor ReFantasio. And take note that Metaphor ReFantasio kind of went out of its way to have slightly older looking characters in their animation style. Yep. If you want mainstream success, you unfortunately are getting pressed more and more into having mainstream style art, in the same way in the West that if you want mainstream success as a first-person shooter, you're going to have the characters look like military realistic characters. You're not going to have them animated in a crazy new daring art style. I don't even have an example of what that would be. Borderlands is about the only game series that changes first-person shooting art style, and it is a counter example because it actually succeeded, at least in the first couple of iterations. Apparently Vampire Hunters is a game that turns Vampire Survivors style gameplay into a first-person shooter where you stack 14 weapons together. Interesting idea. And here we have an actual video that's now playing. So did I need to open up one video in YouTube to get the other videos that are embedded to play? Okay, well, the graphics here seem like they're going to be repetitive and somewhat boring, and this definitely feels like a meme game more than a real serious game. It is covering up the majority of the screen with these different guns for no good benefit at all. If you were going to have a bunch of guns shooting at the same time, you're going to have to just zoom back further to be able to show all of that. Or you could take the same idea and just have one gun that has the abilities of 14 guns. I really do like the concept of having a gun and then feeding the abilities, the stats, into another gun. But yeah, this definitely seems like it is more interested in being a ridiculous meme. And yeah, this is once again not opening up for me. I also need to fix how far I have to drag, because it is kind of ridiculous. I just keep doing this when I don't mean to. I'd already tweaked those numbers, but I need to tweak them more. A Disney styled, which I assume is some kind of animation style, but in reality, let's ask the question of, is there really a Disney animation style at this point without saying a specific decade? Because I don't think WALL-E looks anything like Snow White as far as animation styles go. So yeah, but yeah, the Disney styled horror game By Sweet Carol looks great in its recent trailer. I believe this game was delayed somewhat recently, and I feel like calling something Disney style is much more of a search engine optimization term. To me, while this does look like an animation style reminiscent of something closer to Snow White or Cinderella, I imagine Cinderella is probably a little bit better than Snow White. Its color palette is not really in line with anything Disney would have done. And it is a sad statement if the idea is now we have to call everything Disney style that isn't anime style or Japanese style. But yeah, there was tons of non-Disney animations that were made in similar style to this. This definitely feels like this could be a throwback to something like Clock Tower as far as the game goes, and it does seem like there is more gameplay in the game now, whereas it has up until this point really only tried to sell itself on this animation, which was intriguing. But yeah. The sad statement here is that Western animators don't have any kind of style or consistency amongst each other or even amongst themselves, and there has just been generations of people who have been hired as animators with nobody to properly educate them, no producer or art director to keep them all on the same track to make all the art look the same. It does definitely feel like there's just not that master artist that's drawing the keyframes and a bunch of in-betweeners who are working for years being an in-between animators between making the frames in between keyframes, learning the style of the master artist and the main artist. And so, yeah, the culture never developed or has been completely lost. A big part of that is Disney's own fault. Like, Disney laid off all of its animators, I think several times over. Mostly Disney animation died as soon as Walt Disney died, or just about then. But in much more recent times, they've laid off all their animators and are trying to just get cheaper foreign workers to be animators instead. And I think they probably have succeeded at that at this point. Disney also has nowadays an inherent hate for its existing animation properties, wanting to make low effort live action remakes instead, or wanting to make something completely different instead. But it's not all Disney's fault, although it's mostly Disney's fault, because Nickelodeon also has a lot of blame here, in that all the animators who were given way too much free reign to make different animation styles for Cartoon Network and for Nickelodeon, so Cartoon Network also deserves some blame. All of them were just allowed to draw anything and everything, and that only got continued more in live stream, Netflix type streaming services, where animators still not really held to a high standard. I can see where South Park gets a bit of an exception, in that it always planned on being bad, but Simpsons certainly set a precedence for bad animation being acceptable. When you have the longest running TV show ever still having pretty bad animation, that shows that there just was not that love and concern around animation in the West, whereas Japanese people, with their Japanese pride, took pride in their animation, and Asian people followed suit decades later, which is funny because all anime comes directly from Disney movies. So had Disney movies just stayed and been proudful of their animation and continued to make hand-drawn animation, and then occasionally made CGI and computer-generated animation, we'd be in a very different state, certainly. And there is a real danger, certainly, that we will see the same thing happening with video games, that increasingly you'll see more and more asset flips lowering the standards with garbage animation, more people being willing to buy games that just have assets flips, way too many assets being flipped in them, even if the game itself isn't really an asset flip. AI could certainly increase the speed of that degradation, in that if games do find it acceptable to just use artificial intelligence to generate images or make remasters, that certainly could happen more and more. I'm glad that the Killer 7 update upscaling that seemed to use AI has been so thoroughly rejected by fans. But yeah, they're going to keep on pushing it, certainly, and keep on trying to convince people to accept lower quality animation and AI generated garbage. Let's see. Chiaki Ing remote play client for PlayStation has added touch emulation and console wake up and more. This is a free open source project. I've never heard of it. Lets you remote play PS4 and PS5 to other devices like a Linux desktop, Steam Deck, Android, and Windows. I didn't know you could do that. Do you have to jailbreak a PlayStation to do it? It was originally called Chiaki for Deck, where it vastly improves Steam Deck support over the original Chiaki open source project. Let's see, now it's called Chiaki NG for next generation. So it says D-pad touch emulation, but that's emulating the controller, not so much emulating the games or the system. Now, this doesn't really feel like you can do anything with this software, at least, without having a PlayStation available to you. But yeah, if you have multiple children, I could certainly see a future that we're approaching where you could give, and still this would be a very expensive solution, but it would be cheaper than buying 4 PlayStations. Yeah, you could give, say, your 3 children 3 Steam Decks and then have them remote play one PS5 that's like in a living room somewhere, or PS5 Pro, and have them share that way. Now, yeah, when you run the financials there, you are talking still probably close over $2,000, but that certainly would be cheaper than buying 3 PS4 Pros. No, it wouldn't, actually. It might be slightly cheaper by about $100, but yeah, it would be cheaper than buying 3 PS4 Pros and 3 Steam Decks. But you would get more savings if you also had an Xbox Series X, and you could remote play that to a Steam Deck, which I think you could do. And definitely you can remote play a PC, and it definitely would be more cheaper to have one PC split between 3 kids streaming to a Steam Deck. So yeah, the trick there would be to purchase things slowly and grow your collection of consoles very slowly there, but yeah. And inherently you're bending over backwards to use a Steam Deck to stream, or use streaming at all as a solution. Whereas the concept of sharing also works if you just had one PS4 and made the kids play in the living room and take turns, which you still would have to take turns and share if you're streaming. Streaming inside your own house would probably be good for speed, but actually logically doesn't make a lot of sense. Here's the story I was talking about earlier as we go through the Gaming on Linux stories. The Binding of Isaac Rebirth is getting a free online co-op update soon. Edmund McMillan announced this, although I'm not sure how much he really is involved with Rebirth these days. The other guy, Tyler McVickerson, I think is his name, I think is not very involved at all. And I think it's Tyler McVickerson that has the Cats game that's supposed to come out but still isn't out yet, last I heard. Binding of Isaac Rebirth has a native Linux build, but at this point it's unsupported as the latest DLC, Repentance, doesn't even work with it. You should just use Proton and it's Steam Deck verified instead. So yeah, we'll leave that at that, but that is a pretty big update to have co-op update, online co-op, a full online co-op mode with completion markers alongside a considerable balance update that heavily focuses on buffing items that people don't like, which will change the balance once again, which is why people are still playing the game 10 years later, is that they adjust the balance and it makes the game very different. And this is another link that is not open, so yeah, overwhelmingly positive. In the last 30 days, that is 95% positive, and in its lifetime it is 97% positive as far as the Binding of Isaac Rebirth goes. Don't let the graphics fool you. By far, this is the best game I've ever played, and most people have ever played by the feel of it. And yeah, maybe that says something about society, that they want a dark, gory game. But I still feel like you could probably reskin The Binding of Isaac Rebirth to look more like a Legend of Zelda style game, which is what it's inspired by to some extent, and it would sell very well. A kid-friendly Binding of Isaac Rebirth certainly could be made. But nobody's even tried to really rip off Binding of Isaac. In part because inherently it requires passion and a lot of work and a lot of commitment to update and maintain the game. And most game developers just don't want to commit to that, or most game publishers don't want to commit to that. It is certainly the kind of game that probably could have benefited if it had sold out a little bit more and licensed its engine and its content to a different company to reskin. Edmund McMullen and Nicholas. And yeah, I need to get back and play Afterbirth DLC, and then Afterbirth Plus, and then Repentance. So there's like 3 different reasons to go back personally for me to go and play more Binding of Isaac content. I was hoping they would name the other guy. But yeah, Edmund McMillan, other than Isaac games, apparently is either worked or on, or what did this, no, this just took me to Team Nicholas has published several different games, but Edmund McMillan's games haven't been particularly successful as far as any spin-off games he's made. Which, yeah, that is the danger, certainly, that you can burn bright as a candle sometimes, or you can burn long, but you tend not to be able to do both. So, by making very arguably the best game ever made, nothing else he makes is anywhere close to that. And certainly there's a lot of passion and pain and just mental anguish that was put into The Binding of Isaac and his own life experience. It's a true artistic endeavor, unlike most video games, which are just a capitalistic, like, built by committee endeavor. And inherently, if you pour all of yourself into a true artistic endeavor, well, you don't typically have anything more to pour into your next artistic endeavor. And so, yeah. And that's fine in the old days when you'd spend decades painting the Mona Lisa or painting the Sistine Chapel. But by modern video game development scale, you've got to churn out new games every 4 to 8 years to maintain success. Moving on, I need to hurry here. I'm going to run out of time. Hori's Steam controller releases in the USA in December. This is a Steam branded controller. It noticeably doesn't seem to have touchpads on it. It is there's no built-in battery, no rumble, no headset jack. It is kind of weird why Steam is allowing itself to be licensed this way without the touchpads, but I think Steam is just experimenting, and frankly I think Steam just wants the money to put this logo, and I can imagine how Hori might be happy to make a controller that isn't then inherently built into either a PlayStation or an Xbox or even the Nintendo infrastructure with a logo in the middle. There seems like there might be some back buttons on this controller too, and that may be breaking away from what Xbox and PlayStation controllers have. But yeah, I don't want the next generation of controllers to just have a couple of back buttons and nothing else. Steam Game Recording has now officially launched. You no longer need external software to record a fine clip on Steam. This has been in beta for a while. I haven't heard of anybody really using it or saying that it's particularly good. Definitely it has been a case that every time there is a new update for the Steam Deck, they are fixing little bits with the Steam recording. But yeah, it's not promising enough to me to make it make sense that I would use Steam recording on my Steam Deck over OBS. But I could see how a lot of people who aren't doing too much and just want the raw footage might use it and then go and edit it later. If I edited my content after the fact, which would double the amount of time, at least double the amount of time I spend on making content, I could see where Steam recording would be helpful. But just having the subscribe button pop up when I start recording is something that I only know how to do in OBS, and actually took some work to set up so it would work in OBS, because that's not just something built in that anybody can do. I had to program it. I had to figure out how to get it to work. It's unique to my setup, and there's a whole bunch of little tweaks and tricks like that that Steam Game Recording just won't have the capability of doing any of that. That being said, I'm not sure if I could really run OBS on the Steam Deck and record a game at the same time and get a decent enough frame rate. It would make probably a lot more sense just to have the video going out to a recording box, a capture card from the Steam Deck into a computer. But then if I was just making YouTube shorts and it didn't have to be that fancy, maybe it would work. I still haven't figured out a way that I could make shorts from my gameplay. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm just old in my mentality and don't know how to make the new kinds of content that the TikTok generation is interested in. Steam Deck has officially now come to Australia, or is officially coming to Australia on November 19th. They had announced this, but it will be soon. You'll be able to actually order it. And here's the Australian dollars. I saw a picture, and I don't know if this is true, that there's just like a massive, like 7-layer underground building under this. What is this called? The Shard or the Shell? I think this is called the Shell in Australia. Iconic orchestra hall. But yeah, in the ocean there, I could see maybe you could have 7 layers under it, just of stuff. But yeah, I'm not sure if the picture I saw was real or not, though. It's nice to see the Steam Deck come to Australia. I doubt it's going to really affect the worldwide overall acceptance of the Steam Deck. I do think that while they said they weren't going to just come out with an incremental improvement on the Steam Deck with the latest AMD 9800 XD CPU and RDNA 3 graphics from AMD, there might actually be generational leap improvements there. The latest AMD CPU runs at a higher wattage usage on average, but gives you a much cooler experience. So it might very well be going the wrong direction for the technology compared to the Steam Deck, where the Steam Deck wants it to use less wattage and also be cooler. So yeah, undoubtedly the next Steam Deck would have a custom-made AMD CPU, but they are getting the ratio of performance per wattage down overall, and that's what they're keeping an eye on. Humble choice for November has Persona 4 Golden, Warhammer Darktide, Cassette Beasts, and more. There's a new spooky 2-point museum trailer. Croc Legends of the Gobos Remastered is going to be released in December. I really need to hurry. I have like 10 minutes. And I'm nowhere close to being done. Playing with special beans in Bean to Me is messing with his brain. Crusader Kings 3 free upgrade and new Wandering Nobos event pack is out now. Stardew Valley 1.6.9 has been released with a new friend that will help you find lost items. If you lose an item and can't find it again, a friend will appear in the secret woods. You can purchase it back from for a very high price. Retro Racing Throwback Classic Sport Driving has added Linux support. Super Tux Kart, which is a pretty well known Linux first racing game, has a beta with a benchmark mode, graphics tweak, and more. Inherently, there are very few Linux first games, and they mostly are designed as test cases for Linux operating systems. It's been around for 17 years now. It doesn't look terrible, but it also doesn't look brand new. Manjaro Linux wants your system info with their new data collection tool. I would have to do more research to know what Manjaro is up to these days, why it might be a Linux worth even talking about. Steam Deck SteamOS 3.6.20 update was released for everyone. The BenQ Be Curious Steam Deck dock is great according to them. Yeah, some of these also feel like ads. But maybe they're just legitimate reviews. Lucky Tower Ultimate is absurdly funny dungeon crawler you need to play. There is, I guess, a danger here. I'm still not 100% sure I want to stick with gaming on Linux. I probably do, but there is a lot of things here that feel like advertisements as much as they might be reviews, and it's hard to tell, or very possibly we would never know if these are secretly paid reviews or what advertisements. Then you can grab 15 more Steam Deck games and the Fanatical Play on the Go bundle. And then that's going to bring me to GameDeveloper.com, which, let's see. %, of European developers were laid off in the past year. Yeah. See, the weird thing is that there are GameDeveloper.com articles open, but they're all spread in between all the Steam games. So, yeah. I don't know what happened here. These are old articles too. So, yeah. I guess I'm gonna just be as quick as possible through all the games on Steam. If it's on the fall list, I'm not gonna make a new thing, make another YouTube short on it. If it looks like it might be good, I will put it on the fall list and make a YouTube short. Of course, I'm not really. Does this support English? Yes, it does. Other language is Russian. Still getting English-Russian games, despite what you would have thought would have caused no English-Russian games to be listed on Steam. English Dragon Age Veilguard is the best Steam launch, I guess, ever, with 70,000 concurrent players. And then the joke is how many players actually left the character creator. Pinball game. Probably not that good. Call of Duty helped Xbox Game Pass to a quarterly revenue record. Yeah, still no reason though why they would be broken up like that. It's not like there was links in GameDeveloper.com that went to Steam pages. Something is not happening that should be happening. Let's see, UK Union IWGB launch a manifesto. That's an old story. These are not old games. And I made my little joke 2 bathroom breaks ago at the very beginning of this stream about it being past the US general election, but more seriously, I will say I am glad that games did not get super heavily political as far as what was allowed to be listed on Steam, and that there is now perhaps a small chance of less political content being posted everywhere. Small chance being the main phrase there. There's also the exact possibility of the opposite happening. My boss is scaring me. Yeah. Prison Soul Reunion visual novel. Yeah, I still haven't done anything as far as the fall list cleanup issue. Once again, that's just piling up and becoming a problem, I'm sure. Out of sight, out of mind is easy enough. So you can kind of see that every single GameDeveloper.com article is getting opened up when it shouldn't be the case. Something has gone wrong. It is a standard JRPG game with anime girls being the main sales point. Slightly lewd outfits. This looks like some kind of Spanish only game. English, Indonesian, Chinese. That's not what I was expecting. Interesting. That whole Climb Together game disappeared fairly quickly. Yeah. Increasingly, it is the case that the meme games, the streamer games, are not staying around and not having the level of success that they once had. And that's probably a good thing. There's one political game. I just have no time to antagonize over anything. I've got to make snap decisions and get through this. Some of these games I think also might be things we had already looked at. Well, one of them looked like something we'd already looked at. That's possibly it. Still getting a fairly high amount of uninteresting games. Wouldn't look like low effort games, just low quality games. That'll always be the case, but it'd be nice if there was just one week in which all the games were extremely high quality. Surviving the Abyss, already mixed reviewed. Yeah, it's hard to have anything to say when there's nothing special that I see in any of these games. At some point, if I really accomplished my goals of trying to play a ton of games, I would start to run out of good games to play. That being said, that's not a bad problem to have, and I would just buy newer games. Yeah. Well, to get back to the problem of, oh, I have to buy new games and play new games, instead of having the Steam library problem of I have way more games than I'll ever play before I die. Mega Luma. No, that's not good enough. There is definitely also a unfair element to all of this, in that if something is small, a small game with kind of a cutesy, kid-friendly animation style, it doesn't stick around long enough to be talked about either. So everything gets funneled into the trap of having to be a AAA hyper-realistic game that has a ton of money and advertisement behind it. Otherwise, people won't talk about it and it just won't be that relevant. Although I say people won't talk about it, but the reality is I won't hear people talking about it. If it wasn't creepy, it would be very helpful to me if I could wander around a high school or even a college and just listen to people talking about games, and perhaps there's a survey element there that would be helpful that I could actually do. Yeah, and with the Steam surveys and stuff, there is some possibility that that might be the future of how things go. Alright, well, overall, I think I've mostly fixed the drop frame issues. I'm not sure though I've fixed the quality issue, and both of those issues have to be fixed. But it seems like for the past hour or so, I've dropped only 1.5% of frames. Really should be 0. There very possibly is some more tweaks that need to be done, but it does feel a lot better than what was happening before. And yeah, I am pressed for time, so let's not make this a long ending. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.